for this.
Yeah, yep.
So we'll proceed. First order of business is to approve the minutes from the February 25th meeting previously distributed. Second? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And thank you to Keitha for stepping in as secretary to pro tem. She has a much higher appreciation for the job that Debbie does, so thank you. We really appreciate that. All right, Mitch.
All right, thank you. I think the first order of business on our agenda tonight is to review the project financials. We have one invoice from PMA for $11,194.56, and that was included in the packet as well.
Kathy, anything from your end?
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
I'll entertain a motion to accept the financial update. Second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Are there any opposed? So voted. Thank you. Mitch?
All right, the next section we want to talk about is the enrollment update. You want to start the conversation?
Yeah, I guess I will, yes. Sorry to pass it back and then you pass it
No
back to me.
worries.
So we actually sort of started this discussion at the last meeting, and a couple things have happened and a couple other things in the works. So let me just set the scenario here. When your enrollment subcommittee, which is basically myself and Mark and David and Kathy, participated with the MSBA staff on certifying the enrollment back in 2023 in the summertime before we actually kicked up and started running as the school building committee. We were somewhat aggressive, I think the four of us can agree, on pushing on MSBA about what the enrollment figure should be in comparison to where we are today. And we talked about building projects that were already underway within town. We talked about projects that we were hearing about that weren't necessarily through the planning or approval process. And admittedly, they came back, and we've talked about this before, with a very liberal number. And we were surprised by that. And at that time, we said, well, this is good, because if we're going to see this kind of growth in town, then this is what we need to build to. And so, in terms of the specifics on the numbers, I'm going to turn that back to Mitch and to Mark and maybe to David too, to talk about. But let's assume for a minute that we're not comfortable where we are today based on the growth that we're not seeing or not going to project. And are we building a school that's too big? And obviously with the financial impact of that. So PMA reached out to MSBA with just a phone call, one-on-one with one of their staffers, and said, hey, what if we were to come back to you and say, we're a little concerned about our enrollment figure, certified enrollment figure, that it's too high, and what do we do about that? And the response was, basically, they hadn't seen that before. They've seen school districts that during the feasibility process have come back and said, we're building too small, we need to go for a higher number. So this is sort of a first for them. But I think hopefully they're appreciating our honesty and concern, if that's really the case, that we don't want to build a school that's too big. So the suggestion was that we have what was called a non-binding meeting with MSBA. And again, that would be myself and Mark and David and Kathy with PMA, and that's scheduled for next Monday afternoon, March 17th, to go over the what-ifs if we want to recertify our number. And as we understand it, based on the informal call, and Mitch, you can jump in if I don't get this correctly, they would basically take us back to eligibility, not to square one. We wouldn't have to go through the OPM selection process or the designer selection process, but they would kick us back, which would result in what they call the pause of roughly 4 to 6 months in the project. So, I mean, the good news is we again wouldn't have to start from square one, but it would cause somewhat of a delay in our overall time frame. The positive side of that is if we're comfortable with a new number that we look at, which will obviously would still include some growth, and we'll talk about that, we may be in a better situation, obviously, with cost, in terms of what the project actually looks like. It's a delicate balance between building too big and still trying to build for the total lifespan of the school based on the growth of the town. So that's where we're at. So again, we'll have the discussion about the numbers that are in the presentation. And then I'm not going to ask for a motion tonight because we haven't had that meeting with MSBA. So I don't want to ask you to vote on a pause without having the full benefit of that meeting with MSBA that's going to occur next week. So I will be bringing the results of that meeting back to you 2 weeks from tonight and potentially asking you for that motion. So we'll have a discussion about the numbers. I may take a pulse around the room about what people feel in terms of their comfort level in doing that, if the response from MSBA is favorable about what we do with that recertification process. But that's where we're at on that. Once we get through this discussion, we'll then proceed with the meeting as if we're going along based on none of that occurring, because that's all we can do at this point until we have the benefit of that meeting with MSBA. All right.
Quick question, you did the initial
Yes.
enrollment, did that include the stuff that just came off above the
It did.
So that was already baked in?
It was. And admittedly, multifamily has a lower, whatever their number is in the calculation, has a lower K factor, if you will, in terms of occupancy for students than single family. Yeah, we included that. We didn't know what the exact location was at that point, but we.
had an idea of it.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
And we looked at spaces, when we started looking at the space summary, the MSBA gives you a number of rooms per the number in enrollment. So we looked at that and we started to make, as an administrative team, some adjustments to the numbers to obviously for cost savings, because we don't want to build a building that's too big, so we looked at the spaces. So we've worked those numbers of the spaces down a little bit, anticipating that we may not get to that, 150, 153 per average grade level. So, and if we did get to that, it would be a maximum of 25 students in a classroom. But the MSBA was giving us more space, so we've already kind of almost gone backwards in doing it. We've looked at this, we're trying to limit the space, but on the record is still the overall enrollment, and that's what we're looking at.
And if we reduce it any further than what we've done, they're bound to ask questions about, wait a minute, you're not building the building based on your certified enrollment. So we might as well be upfront with them and figure out what the best plan of attack should be. So, Kathy, you had a question?
Yeah, because we would have to go back, it's a couple of board dates for MSBA, and those are already set. So we would have to go, there's an April board date, that's just hypothetical, and then another couple, 3 months from now, there'll be another board date. So there's 2 board dates we'll have to hit, and we'll get more details when we meet with them next week. But that was basically why we would have the pause. And just a little more further detail, so we're in the PSR submittal right now. So we are planning on submitting that on May 1st. But hypothetically, if this was going to move forward, then we would stop in the process of the PSR submittal. And it would kind of be, when we pick back up, an amended PSR submittal to include any new enrollment that needs to be incorporated. It's from our end minimal, but we still have to talk about design together as a team.
We don't know what they're going to
Yeah.
ask us to do, so it's hard to say.
Yeah, and I've had conversations with Laura, and if it's minimal work, it could be nothing, right? But if it's, they want to go above and beyond, then we're going to have a conversation about that.
And it's basically pencils down in that 4 to 6 month period.
Yeah.
And why it's paused until we get the approval, until we go to those board meetings. So.
That's the approval for the enrollment.
And approval to move ahead back into feasibility.
Yeah, because basically we would have to get a recertified enrollment.
Right, so then once you have that recertified enrollment, you're going to have rework. You're not going to just throw back out what you've already done with different numbers.
We don't know how much rework it will require.
It's not clear if they will require us to resubmit the preferred, not preferred schematic, but preliminary design
Program.
a program, the PDP, that we've already submitted and just gotten comments back from.
Yeah.
Or if they won't require a resubmittal of that and let us kind of pick up about where we are now and kind of catch up with the new enrollment numbers to where we are now as quickly as possible. So that's part of the conversation, I think.
Yeah. Okay, do we want to,
Yeah.
Mitch?
So I want to, the first slide I want to go over, everyone's seen this a few times now, and I think you'll see it again in James's slides too. But this just highlights the enrollment options that we're studying, right? K through 4 at 750 students plus pre-K. A new build cost for that is 150 million concept cost. This is still very early on. And then the grades K through 6 is 1075 enrollment plus pre-K with a concept cost of 198 million. So that's just a refresher of, you know, when we're talking about this overbuilding, that's where we're at. And the next few slides are right from the MSBA's letter about the enrollment certification. I just kind of wanted to walk through the process. It's kind of a high-level overview. I'm not going to get into the methodology and the equations that they use to come up with their ratio. But that has to do with birth rates, and they also look at their rough base enrollment and the projections over the next 10 years, and that's all factored into this equation. So to start, this was the certified enrollment for the 4 options. So I just mentioned it, the 750 and plus the 1075 for K through 6. I know it's tough to see with the sun. I apologize, everybody.
Yeah.
You're gonna put screens in the room?
Yeah, exactly. This slide shows the current historical enrollment data for the district K through 12. So it's broken up K through 6, 7 to 8, and 9 to 12 with the totals. Having 2022 and 2023 for K through 6 at 725. So they take the base enrollment, or they take the historical enrollment, and then they find the base. So with the base, they'll use a 10-year average to project the enrollments, and this is in a much detailed sheet that, like I just explained with the methodology and the calculations, and they spit out these projections. So for K through 4, they're at 565, and K through 6, they're at 805 for the projection. They also take into consideration the out-of-district enrollment. Just hypothetically, they don't know what that looks like. So it could be less or more 1 year, or more and less. So they take a 3.3% and just add it on. So that looks 15 students for K through 4 and 25 students for K through 6. And then the one that we were just talking about is the future development and the projects planned in the town. And I think this might be one of the areas that was overestimated for this projection. Is it looks like some of the developments aren't happening as planned. So K through 6, 245, and K through 4, 170. And all those combined get the enrollment
Sorry.
numbers that we had.
You're-
Oh, that's me. Thanks, James.
I'm like, wait a minute.
And that gets us to the total. So the base plus the out of district and plus the future development gets our certified enrollment through the MSBA calculation. So that being said, factoring in the staff counts for those buildings, we're going to have 126 adults in the pre-K through 4 for 750 students plus 75 preschool gets 951 building occupants. Pre-K through 6 is a little higher, gets you 1305. That is basically the summary of how the high-level summary of how the MSBA and the town worked out to get to this.
And just to be clear, that 1075 students, that is based on our calculation that they certified, not the initial projection calculation.
I think it's,
It was originally 805, and now it's 1075. So I'm just making that clear.
so the 805 you're referring to is their base enrollment.
That is, because
No,
that's
they
what
added.
their methodology got us to that number.
Yep,
After we met with them in the summer of 2023,
yep.
they eventually certified 1075,
Right.
but that was really our number that we pushed on.
Yeah,
So that's, the delta is really what we're talking about.
that makes sense. And just to let everybody know, we weren't involved in the enrollment process, so I'm just giving a highlight of how the MSBA gets to their, with the involvement of the town and the MSBA.
Thanks, Mitch. So Mark, can you just give what you're seeing in terms of, what you see this year and,
I mean, we see some growth in some classes. Our current fourth grade is 127, I think, and then we've got, our current, our kindergarten right now is 78. And then our elementaries range from 96 to 113 in grade 6. So there's definitely some variations, and that's what we look at in terms of number of teachers per grade and so forth. So we're getting, in some grades, closer to that, above 120, but we haven't seen the growth. We haven't seen the move-ins that we anticipated. Even in some of our classes that we anticipated, we started with 95, 96, we thought, okay, by this time of the year, we're gonna be at 105, 106, 107, and we're thinking we're gonna get that, 5 or 6 in each year, then it's gonna create, more of a concern. We haven't seen that growth. We anticipated it, but we haven't seen it. So, we're at about 780 right now, K to 6. And that's counting some of our out of district that may or may not come back, some of our other ones, so it's definitely lower than we anticipated at this point. But, we were going off information that we had from, developments in town and looking at historical growth that may not have entered the school system yet.
So any questions on any of that? I'll just give you my framework at this point. I think, we're all concerned about what the total cost is of this project. And as I said earlier, we need to balance the fine line between affordability and future growth. But we don't want to be unwise with our projections and go forward with a project that is more expensive than what it needs to be. So we'll see what MSBA comes back with. I guess my sense is that if it doesn't penalize us beyond perhaps that 4 to 6 month delay, if it doesn't result in a tremendous amount of rework, and I think going back to the submittal we did for PSP would be, I wouldn't be in favor of that at all. I'm hoping they'll just let us pick up from where we are right now and move forward with that. It wouldn't really make much sense in terms of what is the options that we're looking at to go back that far to square one. So I'm hoping that they're reasonable about that.
Yeah, just in the informal conversation we had, it seemed like the PDP would not be required. to
Yeah,
do
the
this.
PDP, yeah, sorry.
And that was, the ed program was part of that.
Yep.
Because, we're not looking to structurally change what
Yep.
we're gonna do in this building depending on, 10 to 20 less students per grade. We still have the same educational vision regardless of the enrollment.
And as Mitch said, or Mitch or James said, we did get the comments back finally from that submittal in December. And we have to respond to that within 14 days. So obviously, we're still going to do that, and we're still going to do that within the framework of what we're considering right now. So, but again, I can see them having to do some sort of rework with that, but hopefully that would be offset by the fact that we're calling a timeout in terms of expenses to the project during that 4 to 6 month window. So net-wise, we would come out no increase in costs. And as I've been on record more than once, there's no way I'm going back to town meeting and asking for any more money, so we're gonna have to figure out a way to do it with what we asked for.
It's also a decrease in expenses for the MSBA in the state in terms of, what
That's
their
true.
contribution.
Right,
would be.
if we come back with a project that's
I was gonna
projected to be
ask
less than what it is we were looking at, so, yeah. I hope they appreciate our honesty and moving forward and being reasonable with what we're asking for, particularly where it's such an unusual request, but we're certainly trying to be practical about this and make sure we build the right building for the town. All right,
For anyone at the table, any idea on what the actual potential cost savings could be from, if not talking about the huge number of students that could drop off? Would we, out of $190 million, would we get 150 or would we get 80?
We would have to see where the square footage of the building ran and then run cost estimates based on the square footage. So we don't know right now.
And the question is, will that offset the 6 month delay in escalation? Don't know.
And let me just bring up the elephant in the room. I mean, this is not why we're doing this, but, I mean, there's a possibility, again, we talked about it 2 weeks ago, that the new number could get us in a different situation septic-wise as well. So, but again, we're not trying to build to a septic number, but we're trying to build to the right number, but that right number may lead us down that parallel path of having a possible better solution septic-wise for the project we intend to build.
And part of the reason we don't know the answer is we don't know what the new number would be.
I realize, just,
Yeah.
trying to get an idea for that, so I'm a little ballpark number, we had to figure it out.
I mean, it may help us, that new comparison number may help us in the decision of whether or not we should be doing pre-K to 4, pre-K to 6, too, so. And again, septic-wise, for a comparison for those two projects as well. Okay, any other questions, comments about that? All right, Mitch?
I think it's, I'm gonna hand it over to HMFH.
Okay. Okay, so starting with our work plan, like we always do, we are into PSR meeting number 4. We will review the documents at a very high level of what we're going to send to the estimators for cost estimates. We're going to review some draft project schedules, and those schedules have an impact on the cost estimates. We'll also review the site risk assessment report. This is a new requirement by the MSBA. I'll be presenting that. And then we've got some new ideas on the site and some pros and cons for those, so we'll be showing those. Then at the next meeting, we will have costs. Then there's the public forum on April 1st, and then the meeting after that, assuming we're not stopping, all of this assumes we're not stopping, that we'll be asking for a vote on a preferred schematic, which option you want to move forward with. So, as Mitch pointed out, we're showing this one twice. These are the 9 options the MSBA has asked us to carry into this phase. 5 of them we're carrying for comparison purposes, and so we're not getting cost estimated. Those are the ones in gray. Well, I'm just going to point because the gray's a little light. So that's all of the grades 1 through 3 options. It's the base repair at Spring Street, just keep that building and renovate it. And the 1 through 6 options, base repair at Howard and new at McDonald. So these 5 numbers will not change. They're not getting new cost estimates. We are focused, as we've been talking about all along, on pre-K through 4 at McDonald, new and renovated, pre-K through 6 at McDonald, new and renovated. So those are the things that will get new cost estimates. This kind of says that same thing, right? Pre-K through 4, new and renovated, pre-K through 6, new and renovated. The other options will be using the budget from PDP. What we give to our estimators includes civil narratives, and these will be available for everyone to review. Civil narratives regarding utilities and wastewater management, landscape narratives, as well as site plan sketches, kind of what we saw. I guess that was just the last SBC meeting. Architectural narratives and building plans, all the diagrams we've been showing you, narratives from our structural engineers, narratives from our mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection engineers. And the basis of design for those mechanical and electrical systems will be all electric systems, no fossil fuels, and geothermal heat pump with displacement ventilation. The reason for that is the most expensive of the options we will be reviewing. It's not because that's the one we're going to move forward with. There's a decision point coming based on a life cycle cost analysis. That happens in schematic design. But for the sake of comparison, because these are, again, comparison prices, to help you make a decision as to which option, which big picture, grade configuration, new versus ad reno option you want to move forward with. So that's the basis of design that we get cost estimated. Any questions on that?
I know this came up last time, and no fossil fuels, is that MSBA or is that building code?
It's primarily building code. There are ways forward with fossil fuels, but they don't tend to be cost effective because the building codes require you to put all the infrastructure in place for it to be converted to all electric in the future.
If we do opt into the optional stretch code, then we can get 3 incentive points on the reimbursement rate from the MSBA.
Any other questions on this? Okay. So I've got 4 conceptual project schedules for 4 options. But the key, well, let me go through it, and then I'm going to tell you what the key takeaway is. So, gosh, what month is it? We are here in March, right here, 2025. We're in the middle, we're, 3/4 of the way through feasibility study. You can see the design schedule, schematic design, some public outreach. This doesn't imply that there's not public outreach happening all along, because there is with these public forums. But this is kind of a focused period. And then a town vote sometime around the end of the year, still to be scheduled. That's a vote on the big picture funding. At that point, we'll have cost estimates that are not just comparison cost estimates, but are highly detailed cost estimates. That is what the vote is based on. I'm going to skip down to the green, and I'll come back to the orange in a minute. But then we go into design development, which is a really fun phase where we do a lot of this and a lot of showing you imagery, and we're really designing at a high level, but constantly kind of narrowing down into more detail the building at that point. And then construction documents, which you see here from around July to May-ish in 26 to 27. That is, we're still designing, we're still bringing you more and more detailed design information, but we're also creating the document that basically is the map for how the building gets built and how the building gets bid by the contractor. And then the bidding phase with construction starting around July or August of 2027. All of the options you're going to see for the blue and green are basically the same. The design period is essentially the same for all of the 4 options. I'm going to come back up to the orange. The orange is septic. For the pre-K through 6 options, it's wastewater treatment, but it's wastewater management is orange. For septic, the permitting is 6 months, and the bidding and construction is 4 months. You'll see in the later ones, it's much longer. And the idea is essentially that has to be done by the time construction starts, so that the existing building can be plugged into the new septic and a new building can be built over the existing septic. So that's got to be completed during these design phases. Bid period ends in that green star, which is a notice to proceed. It's essentially the contractor comes on board. Construction begins. This is an ad reno option. So what we're looking at 2 phases. One is new build, and here we're showing it at 17 months. And that is, you know, all of the new part of the building gets built. At the end of it, that portion of the building gets occupied. People move out of the existing building into the new building. And then we can knock down, we can abate and demo the existing building. Sorry, no, this is ad reno. We can abate the existing building and renovate it and also complete the site work. And then that portion of the building gets moved into. So it's not until the end of phase 2 that all of the students are in their new building. And so that is around July of 2029. These are highly conceptual. I should have said this to begin with. These schedules make a lot of assumptions. We don't know if we're going to have a CM. We don't know, or GC. We don't know.
Can you just define that?
We don't know.
James?
We don't know. Sorry, we don't know if we're going to have a construction manager, which is a different selection process. They come on board earlier. They have more staff on site. They're also more expensive, but they do allow for early bid packages. So you could start foundations back here. You can start site prep. It changes the way you look at the schedule. So we don't know that yet. This is highly conceptual. I've kind of based this on a GC type schedule, of a design, bid, build type schedule.
Which is what we did for this building.
When will we know if we are going to use a construction manager?
Mitch, you want to speak to that?
Probably when we're more further into schematic design, we'll be able to have that conversation about which direction we're going in. Because like James is saying, there's pros and cons that we have to weigh out to it, right? If there's a complex ad reno with a lot of phasing, we might look at a CM to come in and help that with that process. Or if it's a straight build new, then demo the old building, then we might look at a GC, because there's premium with CMs too, as James was saying.
And I'll add an or occupied site.
Yep. Right, so.
We're fairly certain we're an occupied site. A lot of communities go for a construction manager for an occupied site, but some don't. So it's a decision point.
We've had success on occupied sites building with GCs, within 50 feet, close areas. So, and we've had success as PMA doing early packages too, getting ahead with, foundation support and getting ready. So when the GC comes on board, there's a clean site ready to go, or septic packages, right? So, a lot of.
That's a local option, not an MSBA mandate decision.
Yeah, correct. We get to decide that. Yep, the committee does.
Technically, it needs to be approved by the state. You've got to, but I have never been on a project where they've said, no, you can't go see them.
Now, the key, in a minute, I'm going to get off the ad reno and go to the new construction. The key is to look at this star. This star is when all of the students are in a new facility. Here, we're talking about the middle of 2029 at the end of phase 2. For new, you build the new building. It takes a little bit longer. We're showing 18 months as opposed to 17 months. And in February of 2029, you've got a new building that all of the students are moving into. That's really the key difference in these schedules, is when move-in happens. End of phase 1, everything's built, all the students move in, and then there's a site abatement demo phase. This is the pre-K through 6 option. For ad reno, the ad reno for pre-K to 4 was 17 months. This one's 19 months because it's a bigger building. Again, you're not occupying it till the end of phase 2. We're talking about August, September. Sorry, that's not right. We're talking about September, October. September, October, right there. The key again is it's at the end of the second phase, whereas in new, it's January, February, at the end of phase 1. The key difference between these is essentially a con for ad reno is the kids don't get in until about 6 months later, 6 to 7 months later. That's really the takeaway from the schedules. Any questions on schedules?
So if you go to the 4 to 6, we do choose to go that way, we take the 4 to 6 month delay, and we'll get some of the buildings until 2030. So 2030 still be. So January,
Correct.
February 29,
Uh,
6 months.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And that would all be up to 34.
Correct. And none of these, again, these are super conceptual. Things may make things slide, but at a highly conceptual level, I'd agree with that.
And again, just to add to that point though, if we get the lower enrollment and we do on-site septic facility wastewater, that shows a longer period for wastewater. So a couple of months shorter because of septic, a couple of months longer because of delay, some may come out with a wash.
Well, sorry, let me speak. Let me speak to that. So the wastewater treatment plant, in both cases, the permitting and design and bidding and construction fit within our DD to CD phase. And so it doesn't move the start of this does not move the start of construction date, even though it's longer, because here, we just wait to start it. And this could float. This could happen here, this could happen here. There's a lot of float in it here. There's, I think, a month of float in it here. There's almost nothing. These 12 months and 6 months, and 6 months and 4 months are sort of the upper end of what our civil engineers and experts gave us for permitting and building. They might be shorter both in the septic option and in the wastewater treatment plant option. The key to showing this in my mind was to show that it works, that it doesn't actually push out the construction period. Any other questions on schedules? Okay. Then the site rise. The MSBA has a new requirement for a site risk assessment report. This comes out of a website directly where I input data and it gives me the report back. So this is directly out of their report. I think the thing to look at here are the exposures. The sea level rise, storm surge, we're not going to see any of that, not exposed. The potential for stormwater flooding has a high exposure. For ravine flooding has a high exposure, and for extreme heat has a high exposure. So again, this is coming directly out of the report. Obviously, for sea level rise, we're not exposed. For stormwater flooding, there is a high exposure, historic flooding on site, maximum annual daily rainfall exceeds 10 inches within the overall project's useful life. I have to go back and relook at what annual daily rainfall means, because it certainly doesn't mean 10 inches every day for a year. But I think there is potential for, I think what it's saying is that there is potential in this location for 10 inches of rain in a day within a year. This project, because it's going to be a bigger building, is very unlikely to increase the impervious, sorry. It is likely, this is not accurate, it is likely to increase the impervious area. There will be more, area where rainwater cannot infiltrate into the ground. And the existing impervious area on the project site is between 10% and 50% now. It's closer to 10, I believe. What I think is important here is there are strategies to mitigate this risk. Where you set the entry level in terms of the floodplain is important. So where the building sits up and down. We can maximize pervious area using pervious pavement for parking lots. That's a community decision. There are trade-offs for that. There's cost and there's maintenance involved in that. We can also plan for more green infrastructure, rain gardens, bioswales, retention areas, areas where rainwater can be collected and infiltrate and held till it has time to infiltrate into the ground. We can utilize flood and drought-resistant plantings, and we can design for maximum resiliency, including flood-resistant materials in the ground floor and on the exterior of the building. Any questions on stormwater flooding? Okay. Ravine flooding is similar. There is high exposure for ravine flooding. It's very similar to the other one, and the strategies to mitigate it are really the same. But I'd also add that we can locate as much as possible the building and the roads outside of the wetland and ravine setbacks. The site is tight. There are places where we're probably going to encroach on the 100-foot line. But one strategy is to try to stay out of that as much as we can. Any questions on that? Okay. And then the last one is extreme heat. 30-plus days increase in days over 90 degrees Fahrenheit within the project's useful life. Existing trees being removed as part of the project. Existing impervious area between 10 and 15%, we've seen that. Located 100 feet of an existing body of water. And so the strategies to mitigate that are to utilize highly efficient building cooling system, right? So the building will be comfortable and energy efficient. Plant lots of useful shade trees near playgrounds, near where the site will be occupied, but also to shade the building. Utilize white, high reflective surfaces, mostly for roofing, but also for any paved areas, we can use a lighter color, and that'll help mitigate heat island effect. And then maximize planted area, including exploring green roofs, planted roofs. There are lots of benefits to that. There are also costs and maintenance issues, so we'll be exploring that later in the design process.
So on extreme heat, there's no consideration for the fact that most of the 30-plus days of 90 degrees or more would be in the summer when the school's not in session?
That is definitely something we should talk about. But this is just a report of what they see as the risks. But yeah, I think that's an important factor. The other thing that we haven't explored together yet is how much summer use the building will have.
We have summer school programs now here. They mostly operate out of here, but they would transition back to elementary.
Right, okay.
I mean, the useful life of the building is how long?
50.
I mean, we say we designed for 50 years. The useful life of the building is really, 100 years, depending on maintenance and.
But my point is, the metric is 30 days over 50 years.
More than 30 days,
No, I would interpret that as annual,
I would interpret that as per year.
per year.
But it does not read that way. I can look into that further.
Or something like they do with the rain and the flood, it's some percentage every year. Like a 100-year flood isn't once every 100 years, it's a
Right.
percentage that will occur every year within that 100-year period. I think this could be the similar type thing.
Any other questions on that? Okay, now we get to the fun part.
Yay. All right, I'm gonna do a little walking back and forth between screen and model, which is better anyways. So where we've been looking at siting the building on the Roselle site to right now has been on this kind of southwestern corner of the building. And we've been doing that to avoid getting close to the existing building to help with not being too tight, not having too tight of site logistics, giving enough space for everyone, staying away from the wetlands as very much as possible, as James was just alluding to, for staying outside of that 100-foot boundary where we could. So that's where we've been. What we've been noticing as we're thinking through the design is that it does mean that you're entering the building on a northern side of the site, which means when you're walking in on a cold winter morning, you've got no sunlight on you, so it's making for a much colder experience as you're getting there in the morning, and not really that welcoming entranceway that you want for your students. We've also been hearing a lot of conversations about the approach onto the site and it being kind of tucked back in a woodland area. So right now, as you're coming on this approach, really the first glimpse of the building you're getting is not a welcoming entrance. You're kind of getting an end corner of the building and not having that kind of a nice, clear, full view to make you feel like by the time you've come here, oh, all right, I can see the whole building, I've arrived, and not feeling like you've got a long way to go, or I should say, that's what's happening. Right now, you're getting here, you're seeing the edge of the building, and you still feel like you've got a long way to go to get to that building. It's not kind of drawing you in immediately. So we met with Mark and his team a little bit last week to continue on a thought that Mark had offered up of looking at what if this northern wing that has the gymnasium and a couple classroom spaces was demolished first, and we were able to take some amount of that, or all of that space, to build a portion of the new school. What we liked about that kind of a proposition is that now if you're arriving on site, so my thick dotted outline here is just saying, hey, building's happening here, and probably in this center node, that's where your entrance would be. So now when you're coming and arriving on, we've solved the S-curve, you're arriving on site, and oh, by the time you've kind of just gotten a bit in, you have this nice full view of where you're entering the building. So you have that presence where you feel a lot more connected with the building without having to traverse the whole way through the site. It's also allowing for some really fantastic southern exposure, which means in the morning on January 5th, when you're arriving back into the dead of winter, it's at least sunny and warm if the sun is out. But really, that's also just giving you all of the spaces in the building are going to have a much better daylight exposure when you're able to have kind of that open to the south orientation. You'll see in a layout as we go along that it also kind of has given us a little bit more wiggle room to show an option where there's not fully separate building, but a separate wing for an early childhood, separate from the rest of the 1st through 6th graders. All right, and now I might go over here for a minute. So we made models. And I'm gonna do the little puzzle pieces, and then we'll, as I kind of talk through things, and then we'll pause for a couple minutes and folks can kind of come up and get a better view. So right now we're here. Better way. So this was the scheme you were just looking at. That's where we've been looking, where it's building out all around that southwest corner, northern exposure, northern entrance. And we're going to come up here. Yeah, no, I'm looking at this corner of the building. That's great. This scheme. Yep. This scheme, we took a look at, this now is looking at building a classroom wing along where the current gymnasium of the Rhodes L School is. In the center, where you can see the purple and yellow boxes, thank you, that's the shared spaces, the gymnasiums, cafeterias, and then this further to the south wing now is the early childhood wing. And so that is a 2-story pre-K, lower, and Vernon Upper. See, glad I have the clicker. So that's what we're just going through. So pre-K, I'm going to click that for a minute on the back. We did hear from the educators a little bit of concern about having the littles going up and down stairs. So I wanted to share a couple photos of a similar scenario where it is a preschool, pre-K age children. And when we're doing that, it's not, I don't want people picturing that it's a, back of house fire staircase that's really imposing. It's a nice little welcoming, open, connecting two-story stair that's got a couple of portholes in it. Very much meant for 4-year-olds to be enjoying. So we're still showing schemes that have pre-K and K on the ground floor too, so still decisions, points to be made, but just for point of reference as we go through things. No, we go forward, sorry. Okay. So to wrap up thought on this one, so that's the layout that you would have. A wing of early childhood, 1st through 6th grade, in its own classroom wing. It's got its own art, music, STE rooms right within the classroom wing. And then because we haven't ruled pre-K 4 off the table yet, we're still looking at both. If this layout were to go through a pre-K 4, one scenario is that you would just lop off that 3rd floor, and now you've got, it is admittedly a sprawling 2-floor layout, but it is a 2-floor scenario. That is early childhood, and then 1st through 4th in a pre-K.
So that's a pretty significant change in orientation. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that?
When we talked the other day, did you do the flip? That's true. I haven't, and I'll, you're good point. I'll mention that now. I have some kind of pros, cons at the end. One thing the educators are very good at pointing out for us is that if we are taking away the gymnasium space, which we're new going in, okay, that's either means you're living without a gym or finding a temporary gym, but there are also 2 classroom spaces there as well that this is proposing to go away. So this might be a scenario where you're finding a solution for a temporary gym and modulars on site. What might be a better outcome of a similar layout is if we were to flip-flop and have early childhood get built. Go back, yeah, thank you. Early childhood gets built there. Shared spaces and the big classroom wing happens where we're showing the early childhood, so that you can build classroom wing and shared spaces, all not on top of current Roselle first.
Phase 1
Yeah.
with admin, academic wing here, so that would be phase 1. Sorry.
Yeah, very good. And then all of Roselle gets demolished in one go, and then you build the early childhood wing as a secondary phase for that. But that's not impacting.
So you
where
can
anyone
move
is.
all the Roselle students into the new building,
Yeah.
no interruption to them,
Yeah.
demolish, and in essence, the Spring Street School could come over once it's all complete.
Exactly.
Now that would entail 2, building phases. It would obviously impact the schedule. The schedule would get longer.
Yeah.
The total schedule would get longer.
So to James's schedules earlier, that 2029 move-in would still be happening for the Roselle students, but now you're looking at like the 2030, 2031.
2030, let's say.
School year for the Spring Street students.
I like the orientation this way, but I think we're already facing probably both Spring Street and Roselle now. So putting it out further, maybe not ideal.
You would at least have, because this would, even say it's just a pre-K to 4 scenario, you would have at least that extra 4th grade scenario that you could use as a little bit extra. swing
Keeping
students.
an hour while you're
Yeah.
using some of that space for
Yeah.
1 year.
If you do it the way it's shown as opposed to the flip, your main entrance for the upper grades can't be used until the Roselle's done. So how do you get the kids all into school in that schedule? take place until after the school.
Where you're saying if it's,
That red arrow,
Yeah.
which says building entry,
yeah,
right? You have to pick out. an
There'd be,
area.
there'd be possibilities
Yeah.
for, you know, temporary term entries here, maybe here. There'd be a solution designed in.
But if you flip it, that red arrow comes to the other corner of the purple arrow, or the
Right.
purple building. So then
Yeah.
the entrance is actually on the other side.
exactly.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm on the same page.
And then one other option we looked at as well, just to see how things were fitting. So this option is looking at, how does that classroom space configure itself over the existing Roselle gym? Now, what I have on the screen is, we're just looking at what if we were to have the shared spaces, gymnasiums, cafeterias, taking the footprint of the existing Roselle gym. And as you can see, it's you know, it definitely is a restricted dimension, so it's not the most efficient kind of double loaded corridor usage. We kind of had to squeeze things in, but we are able to fit everything in. It does create a nice administrative space that's able to have a really good sight lines out onto the site. It makes all of your gymnasiums and cafeterias very easily accessible from the main entrance. And then it's making a very nice contiguous classroom bar for the rest of the grades. And so we're looking here at a scenario that's pre-KK on the ground floor, and then first, second, third, fourth. So it's a three-story classroom scenario here.
This option really lends itself to the pre-K to 4. It doesn't really lend itself to a pre-K to 6, because the way to solve that would be to add a 4th floor.
Any concern, we talked about southern exposure, which is great, but you have your highest roof line on the southerly side, so that's going to mitigate some sunlight.
Majority of windows are east and west.
Well, and the shading that this would be included on is now just going to be on kind of the upper volumes of your cafeteria spaces. They'll be double height volumes and getting good light from
Yeah,
the exterior.
it's too bad it can't be flipped, so at least they have the higher elevation on the northerly side to allow more sunlight.
Yeah, which I think might be, is kind of where then this goes, if it's the classroom bar on this side.
Does that help with any of the septic issues? I apologize if you already went over it. If you're moving it to where the current building is, does that help alleviate anything for that?
Doesn't
No.
help you put a wastewater treatment plant.
So truth be told, that was my initial reason for the gym,
Yeah.
was to say the parking area and the recess area in the gym,
Yeah.
could that be used as a septic area? And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
you
Yeah.
went off that, so.
Agreed.
But if it's a good
Yeah,
idea.
That was, and then you're right, because that's where it came up, and then when we brought that to our civil, they said, no, that's even closer to the wetlands over there, we can't use that for wastewater. And I went, oh, but I can use it for the building. All right, and so we kind of touched upon that, yes, anything in these scenarios, either if we are building as I've drawn today, we'd be looking at something temporarily for gymnasium or classrooms, which is why I think we keep refining this to look at what are some other ways that we could work with the geometry on site so that it would require temporary facilities. If everyone's okay with that longer stay. So that's more decisions to come, where our thinking is going. And we're gonna pause for a minute.
So the way to learn from a model is to get right up to it and literally put your eye where an eye would be. So the more of you who are willing to stand up and come through, and come and look at this thing and understand what it means on the surface. I don't see anybody standing up.
But the reality is you wouldn't need temporary, you wouldn't be taking the gym down until you build a new one. So it's really, that is probably the better option.
And just FYI, we understand, Ben took some photos before the meeting, so during the rebroadcast of this meeting on Community Access, we understand those photos will be posted of the various model configurations, so hopefully that does happen.
And if that doesn't, our plan this week was to take some photos, and when we post, either when we post or we can re-upload the.
Right.
So this is the current. Yeah.
This is the
other ones. Yep. We get a six.
There wouldn't be any, if we built the academic wing first, we wouldn't touch the gym unless classrooms. Wouldn't need to at all.
Yeah, that'll,
If it was built on the south side.
If the academic was over here, then your whole building could stay here if we did it that way, and you move
Yeah.
everybody in.
So if you flip flop right now.
I think what we were saying
picture-
at that point, if we did that, then we might somehow hang on to your cafeteria if we need to, or something like that. Just depends.
That could be used as to almost you can enter right, almost.
Right, some way to, yeah. I mean, it's really a push to make sure that when we're done, the building and the siding looks like it's supposed to be, and
Right.
wasn't trying to be crammed in somewhere. And also riffing off of, there was more than one person sort of talking about nervousness going onto the wooden site. And a lot's gonna be cleared because of the septic and stuff, but then to be able to sort of get right there and see everything, I think will be more comfortable for people, so. We'll see.
Is there any possibility that the SBA says? That things could move quicker than 4 to 6?
Oh, for that? I don't think so. It seemed like it was 4 to 6, that was it. They have their processes,
Yeah,
and they have their board dates set, so we're gonna fall on the board date.
Yeah, I'd rather flip it.
Yeah, I know that these are.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, okay then.
Good, long day though.
Escalation's tricky to figure out.
They just lost. Fourth graders just
Well, I
lost.
just said, if it's for a year, it's half a year, it's 2%. I just,
Yeah, it's fair.
I'm not
I
a,
walked in with 32 to 20, so they're all pretty sick. They won this one. And they went on a state championship next to this week.
and then I'm like, it popped up, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's not just.
So there's yeah, so there's a meeting everybody except yeah, the sixth grade, 8th, yeah, because I'm beaching, we had a game on Sunday for playoffs. So, yeah, it's all dependent on which team it was.
I mean, it's just one.
Okay,
Boys lost.
with that,
Well, let's see if we can broadcast
oh yeah.
comments from looking at the bottom. Okay, so any questions on what Stephanie just presented or what you just saw at the model or comments? You were right. Okay.
What, no comments?
All right, on to you.
On to the boring stuff. Just for the budget update, this is the updated cash flow. It's only showing our invoice. We actually just got HMAFHs today, so that's why the little red bar is so low. Then it'll jump up once their invoice is inputted into our budget. But everything's tracking here, the cash flow. Anybody have any questions about the budget? Okay, as far as schedule goes, we're still working towards that May 1st PSR submittal date, and that's just what this timeline is showing before we jump into schematic design in May. And then these are just a reminder of the upcoming meetings that we have scheduled, and I guess the one to remind everybody about is the community forum on 4/1.
And we'll plan to do that regardless of the situation with MSBA on the changing of the certified enrollment, because it makes sense for us to do it either way in terms of updating the community about where we're at. And what I'll plan to do, I'm not going to make you wait for 2 weeks, full weeks, and since we're meeting on Monday with MSBA, I'll try to provide you with some sort of written summary of what it is we anticipate bringing to you on the meeting the following week in terms of whether or not we're going to ask for that vote and give you a summary of what the ground rules that MSBA has laid out for the process of calling for a pause for the recertification, if we're going to go that route. So either way, I'll give you an update so you got that information. You can be thinking about that before the next meeting.
We expect to vote on that on the 25th.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, if we're not gonna, if there's no, there could be no action to take because we decide that,
We should have just 17th of the MSB, they should give us some kind of an answer.
Yes.
Have enough to-
yes, and the process for what it is and, you know, the anticipated board dates that we're gonna try to meet if we're gonna go to the board to get that number recertified and what that means to the schedule. So we'll have an idea what that looks like. So I'll try to lay that out for you, at least in an email, so you can be thinking about that in advance of the next meeting. I just don't want to present that to you for the first time cold. It could be such a major shift in what we're anticipating doing at this point. Okay, anything else to come before the committee meeting? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? So voted. Thank you very much.